Do you think your cat would miss you if you never came home one day? Maybe, maybe not. Well, what if instead of one day, it was forever? What would your cat do when the earth falls silent? No alarm clocks, no cars, no voices drifting through the walls. For most animals on Earth, the disappearance of 8 billion humans would be a seismic event, a rupture in the fabric of daily life. But for cats, well, they'd probably just yawn. Cats are one of the most successful large predators on the planet. Roughly 600 million domestic cats live alongside us right now. They sleep in our beds, eat from our hands, and tolerate our cuddles on their terms. But beneath that lazy, purring exterior is a machine honed over 10,000 years of semi-wild survival. So the real question isn't whether cats would survive without us. Science says they almost certainly would. The real question is, what would they become? To understand that, we need to walk through their new world hour by hour, day by day, year by year. Starting the moment the last human vanishes. In the first hours, nothing dramatic happens. Most indoor cats would simply wait. They'd sit by their empty food bowls. They'd meow at closed doors. They'd hop onto beds and need blankets that still carry the scent of their owners. Cats have roughly a 12 to 24-hour buffer before serious hunger sets in. But by the second day, something shifts. The waiting turns to pacing. The pacing turns to problem solving. Domestic cats are actually quite good at escaping confined spaces when motivated. Loose window screens, cat doors, gaps in fences. Most indoor-outdoor cats would find a way out within 24 to 48 hours. But what about cats that are fully indoor, those that have never once stepped outside? These animals face a steeper challenge. Some might be trapped for days, relying on water left in toilets, puddles from condensation, or taps left dripping. A few might not make it out at all. But many would surprise us. Cats are extraordinarily resourceful. They can leap, climb, squeeze, and manipulate their environment in ways we rarely see because we usually just open the door for them. By the end of the first week, the streets belong to the cats. The initial chaos of an empty world would actually benefit felines enormously. Without cars, the roads become safe corridors. Without dog owners, loose dogs would eventually scatter or die. Without noise and human activity, prey animals, mice, rats, sparrows, pigeons would begin to creep out of hiding. And cats would be waiting. Here's something most cat owners already suspect, even if they don't want to admit it: cats are born hunters. Even well-fed domestic cats kill billions of birds and small mammals every year while humans are still around. Studies suggest that in the United States alone, free-ranging cats kill between 1.3 and 4 billion birds annually. Remove the humans, remove the food bowls, and that hunting instinct wouldn't need to switch on. It would simply stop being switched off. Within days, most former house cats would be actively hunting. Mice and rats, which thrive in urban environments, would be their primary prey. Ironically, with human food sources, restaurant dumpsters, grocery stores suddenly available but quickly rotting, rodent populations would actually spike in the short term. Which is very good news for cats. Cats are famously solitary. And like wolves or lions, they don't form tight-knit packs with defined hierarchies. But they're not truly antisocial either. Feral cat colonies already exist today, centered around consistent food sources. Think the barn cats of rural farms, or the street cats of Istanbul and Rome. These colonies are matriarchal, groups of related females who share territory and even raise kittens together, while males roam wider ranges, often fighting for dominance. Within the first month of a human-free world, we'd see this pattern expand dramatically. Former house cats would begin clustering around resource-rich locations, abandoned grocery stores with rotting but still edible food, parks and alleys teeming with rodents, waterways filled with fish and frogs. Territorial boundaries would be established, not through loud warfare, but through an invisible language of scent markers, posturing, and careful negotiation. Cats would spray door frames, scratch building corners, and deposit scent glands on every available surface, building a map of who owns what. The city would become a patchwork of invisible empires, ruled not by humans, but by individual cats and loose matriarchal colonies. Not all cats face the same new world. Geography matters enormously. Urban cats have short-term advantages: dense rodent populations, abundant shelter in the form of abandoned buildings, and access to water from burst pipes and puddles. But cities also carry risks that compound over time. Within months of human absence, infrastructure begins to fail. Without maintenance, electrical fires would break out. Gas leaks would accumulate. Floods would sweep through and maintain drainage systems. Cats are smart enough to flee immediate danger, but a slow-building chemical contamination or structural collapse gives no warning. Rural cats, meanwhile, would thrive. The countryside offers unmatched hunting: rabbits, voles, squirrels, songbirds. Barns provide shelter. Streams provide fresh water. And unlike the city, the countryside doesn't collapse. Within the first year, we'd likely see a migration. Cats from city fringes would begin drifting outward. The urban cat population would contract toward the most stable structures: stone buildings, elevated terrain, areas above flood levels. The suburbs, interestingly, would become cat paradise. Large gardens gone wild, abundant bird feeders slowly emptying, garages and sheds providing shelter, and the sheer density of former pet cats already established there. Suburban cats would arguably be the biggest winners of the first year. Here's a biological fact that changes everything. Cats can breed at a staggering rate. A single female cat can have to 2-3 litters per year, with 4 to 6 kittens per litter. In a world without humans to spay and neuter them, and without predation pressure to slow them down, the math becomes astonishing. One unspayed female and her offspring could theoretically produce over 2,000 descendants in just 4 years if all survived. Of course, in the wild, most won't. Kitten mortality in feral colonies runs between 50 and 75% in the first year. Disease, predation, exposure, and competition take a heavy toll. But even with those losses, cat populations would balloon. Today, roughly 200 to 600 million domestic and feral cats live on Earth. Within a decade of human disappearance, that number could easily triple or quadruple. And with more cats comes more pressure on prey animals, on ecosystems, and on the cats themselves. Cats are obligate carnivores. And like dogs or bears, they cannot survive on plant matter. Every calorie they consume comes from animal protein, which makes them extraordinarily effective and potentially devastating predators in a human-free world. In the short term, our rodents would be the primary prey. Mice and rats are fast breeders themselves, and their populations would initially surge with the collapse of human pest control. But cats would pursue them relentlessly. As cat populations grow, they'd expand their prey base. Birds, especially ground-nesting species, would face intense pressure. Rabbits, squirrels, and even juvenile foxes could find themselves on the menu. In coastal and wetland areas, cats would raid fish from shallow streams, frogs from ponds, and shorebirds from beaches. This predatory pressure would reshape ecosystems in ways that are difficult to fully predict. Some species that currently flourish under human-altered landscapes might collapse. Others, like rats and mice, might ultimately find balance through classic predator-prey oscillation periods of boom and bust cycling between predator and prey populations. But the birds are the real wild card. Cats are already considered one of the leading anthropogenic, meaning human-caused, threats to bird populations. Remove the humans, but keep the cats, and that threat doesn't disappear. It multiplies. Cats have always had predators. In a human-free world, those predators would start making a comeback, and that changes the cat's equation dramatically. Coyotes, already present across most of North America, are the cat's most immediate danger. Coyotes are adaptable, intelligent, and omnivorous. They already prey on domestic cats in suburban areas. Without human presence limiting their movement, coyote territories would expand. Suburban and urban cats would find themselves in real danger. Large raptors, eagles, owls, and hawks would also become more prominent threats, especially for kittens and small adult cats. Great horned owls, which already hunt cats in rural areas, would find rich hunting grounds in the newly quiet suburbs. In Europe, lynx and wolves, currently recovering from centuries of human persecution, would accelerate their recolonization of former territories. Lynx in particular are efficient cat hunters. They share similar habitats and similar prey. The relationship between these two felines would become one of the defining ecological dramas of the post-human world. And in Asia and Africa, where wildcats and domestic cats already share territory, the removal of humans who currently protect pet cats would leave those populations immediately vulnerable to leopards, jackals, and monitor lizards. Predation pressure would become one of the most powerful forces shaping cat evolution in the centuries to come. Cats are unique among our domestic animals in how thin the line is between tame and wild. Dogs have been selectively bred for 15,000 years or more. Their brains, bodies, and behaviors have been profoundly reshaped by coevolution with humans. Without us, dogs would struggle. Many would die. The survivors would gradually run wild, but it would take many generations. Cats. Cats were only domesticated around 10,000 years ago, and much of that domestication was, frankly, optional. Cats came to us. They chose to tolerate human proximity because it benefited them. That independent streak never left. Today, as domestic cats differ from their wild ancestors, the Near Eastern wildcat are less than 1% of their genome. The behavioral differences are largely a function of socialization, not genetics. Which means, within 1 or 2 generations, behavioral rewilding would begin. Kittens born without human contact would be feral by default, wary, alert, and inclined to avoid rather than approach large unfamiliar animals. They would still purr, still groom, still need, but the social vocabulary reserved for humans would gradually fade from the population. The friendly neo-sound scientists believe cats developed specifically to communicate with humans, not other cats, would become less common. Cats would revert to the limited vocalizations of wild felines, chirps, growls, hisses, and the occasional yowl during mating season. Within a century, most of the world's cats would be, behaviorally speaking, wild animals. Now, we fast forward. It's been 500 years. The cities are ruins. Forests have reclaimed the suburbs. Wetlands have re-established themselves along former highways. And cats are everywhere. But they don't look quite the same. Natural selection is a patient sculptor. Over centuries, it would work on the traits that matter most: speed, camouflage, hunting efficiency, and disease resistance. The soft, round faces bred for human appeal would gradually give way to longer muzzles, better for gripping prey. Plush, silky coats bred for beauty would give way to coarser, weather-resistant fur. Coat color would shift, too. Solid whites and vivid oranges, colors that stand out in the wild and make a cat easy for predators to spot, would become rarer. Earth tones, stripes, and spots would dominate. Camouflage would return as a survival premium. Body size would likely increase in some lineages. Larger cats can take larger prey, which is an advantage in a world where rodent populations have been hunted to lower densities. Over time, some populations might trend toward something resembling a small wildcat or a large feral, mid-sized, lean, built for endurance over short bursts of domestic laziness. In isolated geographic pockets, islands, remote valleys, dense forest refuges, separate populations might even begin to diverge. Speciation, over millions of years, could eventually produce recognizably different descendants. But that's very, very deep time. In the meantime, over the next few hundred years, what we'd be watching is simpler and more immediate: the rewilding of a domestic animal. The undoing slowly, imperfectly, magnificently, of 10,000 years of cohabitation. In ecology, predators don't just kill things. They shape entire landscapes. When wolves were introduced to Yellowstone in 1995, the effects cascaded far beyond the obvious. Elk changed their grazing patterns to avoid open areas. Riverbank vegetation recovered. Beaver populations surged. The rivers themselves, freed from overgrazing, began to meander differently. Scientists call this a trophic cascade. The reintroduction of one predator at the top of the food chain rippled all the way down to the shape of rivers. Cats, as a newly dominant mesopredator across much of the world, would trigger their own cascades. In areas where cats become sufficiently numerous, small rodent populations would be suppressed. This would allow certain plant species that rodents typically seed cache and disturb grasses, forbs, ground layer plants to recover. Birds that compete with cats for rodent prey might decline. Rabbits, which cats hunt but less efficiently, might expand into the niches left by rodents. The picture that emerges is not a simple one. Cats would not simply fill a predator vacuum and leave everything else unchanged. They would reshape the ecosystems they inhabit in ways subtle and sweeping over decades and centuries. Whether that reshaping is, on balance, good or bad depends entirely on your perspective and on which species you happen to be. Not all cats are built equally for this new world. Humans have bred cats for thousands of years, selecting for traits we find beautiful or endearing or traits that sometimes directly conflict with survival. The Persian cat, with its flat face and short and nasal passages, struggles to breathe efficiently. It cannot hunt effectively. It overheats in warm climates. Without air conditioning, regular grooming, and veterinary care, most Persians and other extreme brachycephalic breeds would be among the first to perish. The Sphinx cat, hairless and bred for indoor living, would face immediate thermoregulatory crisis in any climate with cold winters or intense sun. Without the insulation of fur, it cannot regulate its body temperature, a fatal disadvantage in the wild. Even Scottish folds, with their distinctive folded ears, a mutation that also causes painful joint disease, would find survival a significant challenge without pain management. The breeds that would thrive are the ones closest to the original, mixed-breed Ellie cats, long-legged barn cats, the scrappy, adaptable survivors who've been semi-wild for generations. In this sense, the street cat, the one we often overlook, would inherit the earth. Geography would determine cat destiny as much as biology. On islands, cats could become an ecological catastrophe. Introduced species, including cats, have already driven dozens of island species to extinction, from the Stevens Island wren of New Zealand to multiple ground-nesting seabirds across the Pacific. Without humans actively managing or removing cat populations, that devastation would accelerate. Island ecosystems evolved without terrestrial mammalian predators for millions of years. Their birds don't know how to fear a cat. They nest on the ground. They walk rather than fly. Against a healthy, hungry cat population, they have almost no defense. On continents, the story is more nuanced. In Africa, cats would encounter leopards, cheetahs, servals, and African wildcats, relatives with millions of years of evolutionary head start. Domestic cats in Africa would likely be outcompeted and hybridized into regional wildcat populations within a few centuries. In Australia, where cats are already a documented ecological crisis, removal of human control would be devastating for native fauna, bilbies, quolls, numbats, and dozens of small marsupials already pushed to the brink would face intensifying pressure. Without conservation management, in temperate North America and Europe, cat populations would likely find an equilibrium, suppressed by returning large predators, limited by harsh winters, but persistent and widespread for centuries to come. Here's the question that cuts a little deeper. Cats don't form memories the way humans do. They don't narrate their histories. They don't build monuments. But they do have associative memory, powerful, durable connections between stimuli and emotional states. A cat raised with humans doesn't just learn that humans provide food. It learns that humans are safe. That certain sounds can opener, a familiar voice, signal warmth and comfort. That certain textures, a favorite blanket, trigger contentment. In the early weeks and months of a human-free world, some cats would almost certainly exhibit what looks like grief. They would return to familiar spots, wait at familiar doors, respond to recorded human voices, if any technology still played. But cats live in the present in a way humans rarely do. The grief, if that's what it is, would not last. Survival instincts would override it. New associations would form: the smell of prey, the warmth of a sheltered corner, the presence of other cats. And within a generation, no living cat would have any memory of a human at all. 10,000 years ago, a small wild cat from the Fertile Crescent made a calculated decision. It moved closer to human settlements, tolerated the proximity of the most dangerous species on the planet, and accepted a bargain: comfort and food, in exchange for something softer and harder to name. Companionship, maybe. Or just opportunity. With cats, it's always a little hard to tell. What science suggests, what the feral colonies of Rome and Istanbul and Tokyo already demonstrate, is that this bargain was always optional. Cats chose us, at least partly. And in a world without us, they would simply choose something else. They would choose the hunt. They would choose the colony. They would choose the warm stone in the afternoon sun and the cold wind of an open hillside. They would choose, in short, to be exactly what they always were: underneath the purring and the kneading and the theatrical meowing at the food bowl. If you've ever watched a cat sitting in a window, perfectly still, perfectly alert, watching the world outside with those ancient amber eyes, you might have wondered what it was thinking. The answer, probably, is something very much like this. That out there, beyond the glass, is a world it could navigate just fine. It's staying, for now, but on its own terms. As always,